I'm joined once again by a super nice guy who's been given an incredibly raw deal by a system that I frankly object to. Douglas Mackey, welcome back to the show. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Jason. Great to be here.
It's good to see you again, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing well and doing good. You are a do-gooder. You've got a great You got a great X channel. I can see, over the months that we've kind of grown to know each other through the internet, I can understand how you grew because you've got a great sense of humor. You're constantly posting poignant and thoughtful things on X. People can follow you there at Doug Mackey Case. They can also follow you on Substack, and people can help support your legal defense at Meme Defense Fund. For people who don't remember Douglas, he is the guy who got jammed up for posting memes. Why don't you just give us a little background, Doug, for people who might have missed it?
Yeah, so in 2016, I posted a meme that I just found on the internet that said that Hillary Clinton supporters could cast their vote by text. And this meme was floating around, and 4 or 5 years later, under Joe Biden, they turned this into what was really the first planned lawfare political prosecution case, because this predates the J6 thing even. So I was convicted, and the case is on appeal and waiting on the appeal, which is taking quite some time. Should be interesting to see what the appeals court rules.
And so you told us last time how you got all jammed up in the Eastern District of New York. I've learned quite a bit about that. I presume that goes to the Second Circuit when you're on appeal, right?
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
And have you had any cases in the Second Circuit prior to this, or this is going to be your first foray into the appellate court?
Yeah, this is my first foray to court, period. So,
Unbelievable. And I mean, they wanted to put you in jail. They really have tried to ruin your life. And frankly, look, just because you're not in jail, this has been a huge financial burden on you and your family. Congratulations, by the way, you've had a child since this all happened. So I'm glad it hasn't impacted your life to that extent. But give us a little bit more background, because I want to talk about this some more.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's exactly like you just said. It's extremely financially taxing and just mentally, emotionally taxing as well. And for, having to deal with and have family members dependent on me and all that. So yeah, they sentenced me to 7 months in federal prison. And I'm fortunate enough that the appeals court saw the merits to the appeal, that they granted an appeal bond, so I don't have to serve any time. And we are, President Trump has been very friendly to my case and sympathetic to my plight. And however, we would like to win at the appeals court. So instead of go to President Trump for a pardon. So we're hoping to win that in the appeals court, so that there's a precedent that this kind of law can't be abused in this manner. So that's where I'm at right now, and we've had some great fundraising, and but all the money definitely goes out the door. There's no question about it. I mean, some people think, oh, you raise a bunch of money, like you're sitting on a pile of money. Like every single dollar has gone to either attorneys or discovery fees and all that kind of jazz. So it's
Right.
very, very taxing.
Yeah, I mean, and when you say discovery fees, there's lots of logistical and technical things involved in you producing documents and sending them around, I'm sure. I mean, I've had a small taste of lawfare, but nothing like what you've had. I've got a case in the Second Circuit as well. It's good
hmm
to see that Give, Send, Go, and some of these other things have allowed you to raise money. But didn't you have some problem with GoFundMe not allowing you to even use their platform?
Oh yeah, with GoFundMe, I didn't even try to use GoFundMe because I viewed it as a fait accompli that they were going to ban me in 2 seconds and refund everybody the money. So yeah, GoFundMe is a no-go.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that happen a million times. There's I have a lot to say about GoFundMe, but not for today's show. And I am under an unconstitutional court order right now. There's certain things I can't talk about, but I hope to discuss that with you in the future because you've become so educated, not as a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer, but you and I have been forced to become experts in lawfare and counter lawfare, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that I've had to learn the criminal side and you've become the expert on the civil side.
Yeah. And I mean, believe me, it's not something I'm necessarily proud of, but it's just been forced upon me. And, the reason why I wanted to invite you back today, Doug, not just because I'm so sympathetic to your case and I want you to win. I want people to also understand how important it is what you're doing, that you're not just going to President Trump. You could use a lot of this money to, appeal to President Trump through various methods and try to get a pardon. But I want people to really focus on what you just told us, that you want to win for everybody's freedom so that this sort of thing can't be abused in the future. And we've already begun to see a taste of how it is being abused just a few weeks ago. And a lot of people have forgotten about this. I know we're on the verge of seeing Iran get destroyed and perhaps plunging into another 20-year-long disaster. People have basically forgotten about this, but we've got James Comey a few weeks ago was on the beach and he just happened to find this amazingly coincidental arrangement of seashells. He wasn't playing with Legos that day. Doug, tell us a little bit about this and how you feel this impacts your case or is important relative to your case.
Yeah, so I mean, this is very relevant, this James Comey figure coming across this 8647, which so he says he came across this arrangement of seashells, which can be taken two ways, really. 86 can mean, get in a restaurant world, get the client or the customer out of here. But it also has another meaning in the sort of intelligence and sort of spycraft world, which is kind of like eliminate the target. So it's when we're talking about freedom of speech, the government wants to come down on people like me who share a meme that's satirical, that's humorous, and then you look at the kind of venom that's being spewed by the likes of Comey, and look, threats when they cross a certain threshold are no longer legal. Obviously, it's sort of a high bar, but this kind of a threat is not viewed as usually something that's legal. I mean, it's borderline if it's not really like an imminent threat, then sometimes you can sort of get away with saying things like this. But it's funny that these people become free speech absolutists when it comes to them wanting to push their own
Yeah.
sort of illegal or barely legal point of view.
Yeah. And I mean, I appreciate how carefully you're talking about the legality of speech because even though your First Amendment rights have been abused, you don't want to swing to the other side of the pendulum and suddenly say because somebody is doing this, they should be in prison. But it is just such a stark contrast how James Comey can, because here's the other thing. We got to be honest. Doug, were you ever the director of the FBI? Just
Exactly.
wondering. I don't
No,
think so,
never
right?
have been.
Yeah. Do you have a Juris Doctor degree? Have you been a federal prosecutor? Do you know all about the law? Or are you just a random guy who was screwing around on Twitter with funny memes who put up something that was not even remotely as explosive as what James Comey just did here? I mean, it's just the contrast to say that we've got a two-tier justice system. It's really understating the problem, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about my account, which is only seen by a handful of people. And then we got James Comey with 500,000 or a billion, and he's seen as a leader of the resistance. So this sort of James Comey thing has already led to a number of prosecutions because I think they just busted a guy who was saying 8647 and they investigated him a little bit on Blue Sky or something. And they found that he was actually making more credible and specific and imminent threats against President Trump that did cross the line into illegality. So this creates a massive headache for the FBI having to deal with all these people now on places like Blue Sky, which by the way, Amazon and the Apple App Store, they shut down Parler for far less than what we see going on Blue Sky every day, where the transgenders are calling to kill the Supreme Court justices, and all types of people are calling to kill Donald Trump, and
Wow.
the list goes on and on.
Unbelievable. I mean, you see, now you've just raised a point that I hadn't even thought about, that James Comey is complicating things for the FBI. And isn't it true that to some extent that would be in his interest to make it look like Donald Trump's FBI is incompetent and we've got Kash Patel and Dan Bongino in there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They also want to stir up as much chaos to try to make it seem like President Trump's not in control and the country's, going down the tube. So it's sort of like these people want to burn it all down if they don't have power. If their worldview is out of power, then they just want to burn everything down.
It's quite upsetting. And I mean, I agree with you. They're creating chaos. I hadn't heard about this, but it's interesting that this guy's from Oakton, Virginia. You know who else lived in Oakton, Virginia was Robert David Steele. It seems to be an intelligence heavy town. Are you familiar with Virginia at all?
Only a little bit. Only a little bit. I
Yeah.
do understand that it's certainly central for Pentagon intelligence. There's a lot of things going on there.
Yeah. So this is apparently a former United States Coast Guard officer. I've had a lot of interesting interactions with the Coast Guard because you see, the Coast Guard is an interesting branch of the military in that it's the one that is not subject to the Posse Comitatus Act because the Coast Guard also has a law enforcement role. So I believe that I've seen evidence of the Coast Guard being used in these disinformation efforts against people like you and me, people who just want to be on the internet expressing ourselves. I had some former Coast Guard people kind of bugging me, and I got a phone call actually from this Captain Willie. I had contacted the Admiral of the Coast Guard. Have you heard this call at all?
No, no.
Let me play this for you. This is kind of funny and interesting here. Hello?
Hi, is this Mr. Goodman?
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon, sir. My name is Captain Willie Carmichael with the U.S. Coast Guard in the Southeast United States.
How are you?
How are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Sir, I was passed your contact information from a phone call that Admiral Schofield received over the weekend from yourself.
Uh-huh.
And I just wanted to make sure that you had our official number to contact us on official matters here in Miami. And I can pass that number to you if you like, if you're ready to.
Oh, no, we're talking right now. Why don't we just talk right now?
In what regard, sir?
You called me.
Sir, do you remember your voicemail that you left for Admiral Schofield?
I do remember contacting Admiral Schofield. I can't say that I recall the exact content of it. Would you like to refresh my memory? What in the voicemail prompted you to call me?
Well, I just wanted to make sure that you had the official number for Coast Guard District 7, since the number that you used was his personal cell phone. So I'm ready to pass that.
I'm aware of that. He's a human being. I'm allowed to call people.
Absolutely, and I just want to give you a really good number so that way, whatever your concerns are.
I like that number. I wanted to call him on that number. Why didn't he call me back? I think the Coast Guard is doing something illegal. I don't appreciate your phone call.
Okay.
What's your name again?
Captain Willie Carmichael, sir.
Uh-huh. And you're the captain of what? The Southeast Sector?
I am the Chief of Staff of Coast District 7.
Okay. What's going on with the Homeland Security Task Force Southeast and the Coast Guard's involvement in that? I think you guys are in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. I think someone has figured out that they can use elements of the U.S. military and poor interpretations of the law to utilize military assets against U.S. citizens engaged in First Amendment activity. And I think the Admiral should call me back from his cell phone to discuss that, not you.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, sir.
Convey that
But
message to him, please.
those are official ways that we handle these
I don't
things.
care about the official ways because we're going to talk about this with Congress. So convey that to the Admiral, please. Okay?
Sir, there are official
I
ways
don't
that
care. I have official ways of doing things, and you are
here's
being instructed in those ways. I think the Coast Guard is breaking the law and violating the Constitution. Get off my phone, Captain.
have a wonderful day, sir. Thank you for taking my call. How'd you like that call there, Doug?
Wow. Wow.
Did you know
Uh,
about that? That there's a task force between the FBI and the Coast Guard where they, I think, can take advantage of the fact that, I mean, of course, I'm not a lawyer, so what they're
right.
doing that violates or doesn't violate the Posse Comitatus Act, I really don't know. But they have this task force where the FBI can utilize Coast Guard assets, and I think they've even taken former Navy assets and put them in the Coast Guard, get them to do things on Twitter. I was getting really razzed by a bunch of guys who were in the Coast Guard. It was pretty weird. So I called that admiral. I found his cell phone, called him up. He obviously was annoyed that I called him on his cell phone. He had Captain Willie Brown call me back.
Wow. Wow. I didn't know that about the Coast Guard, the FBI at all. It certainly raises alarms. I mean, whenever you see something like that,
Yeah, I
and we
mean, they
see how
love.
all these arms have they all have their own intelligence arms now, like Postal Service intelligence and all that. And it's very suspicious, I think, when you see the Ukraine thing too. All of these assets, and then they're jumping on social media and sort of bombarding people with all kinds of, you know, messages. So it's very strange.
It really is. And I mean, again, that whole Coast Guard vector came at me when I was doing research into the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt. There was a former, I guess he was former Navy or maybe he was a former Army Ranger or something who now said he was working for the Coast Guard. So, I mean, I think you're probably aware of the FBI JTTF, the Joint
Oh
Terrorism
yeah.
Task Force, where they basically join up with local law enforcement. And there's a lot of questions about the constitutionality of these things. I think the FBI sort of said, hey, we've had so much success with this JTTF. Why don't we make task forces with other things? And certainly someone who is a lawyer and understands how the Posse Comitatus Act does or does not intersect with things that the Coast Guard does, I think you could start to imagine how they would come up with all kinds
Yeah.
of creative ways that they can abuse people's rights with this, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they take these kind of things and turn them inward on us. Imagine if we just had a Coast Guard and FBI that, was willing to seal the border and stop illegals from coming
Exactly.
in instead of
Right.
focusing on what people are saying online.
Yeah. Now let's just take a look at this for a second, because I mean, again, it's a confusing thing. But the Posse Comitatus Act generally restricts the use of the Army and the Air Force in civilian law enforcement, but the Coast Guard is exempt. The Coast Guard, as a
Wow.
law enforcement agency, has special statutory authority to enforce federal laws and is not bound by the Posse Comitatus Act. So again, I wonder if it becomes very easy to transfer from the Navy to the Coast Guard or something like that. So here you go. It's part of the Department of Homeland Security. And in peacetime, the Coast Guard operates under the Department of Homeland Security. It can be assigned to the Department of Defense during wartime. It's this sort of hybrid military law enforcement thing. It's very strange, isn't it, Doug?
It is strange. It is very strange. It is strange to see it under the DHS too.
Yeah. So we really don't know what these things are being used for. And then, I become very concerned when I hear about stories like yours, where the Justice Department that's supposed to keep us all safe is actually being used to destroy your life. It's incredibly upsetting. So back on James Comey, I don't know how closely you followed what happened with him, but do you know of anything that has happened as a result of this 8647?
So all I know is that he submitted to an interview at the FBI field office there in Washington, and I'm sure he said, "Oh, I didn't know what it meant, and I just meant like, oh, peaceful transfer of power and all that kind of stuff." So I guess he probably gets away with it because it's not like, he didn't, there's not enough evidence, I'm sure, to charge him with anything, but that's all I've heard basically.
Yeah.
Well,
I
let
mean,
me just
that's,
point out one thing that in my
yeah.
case, because they posted this meme, the FBI, and this is what they feel like they have the right to do in these political cases, is process service on people who post something like the meme that I posted. So they start digging through your whole entire life, all of your direct messages, all of your emails, all of your uh, tax records, bills, and stuff. So I'm curious whether they're doing that to James Comey like they did to me because he posted something that could or could not be interpreted as something illegal. So if we don't have two standards of justice, then let's see if they're going to dig through James Comey's whole entire life here.
Yeah. And have you had any contact? I mean, I know you've had a lot of negative contact with the Department of Justice, but have you had any additional contact with them since Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and all of those people have taken the helm?
So I haven't had any really direct contact. I did have the pleasure of meeting Ed Martin,
Ah,
and I do know that they're taking a look at a lot of cases like mine, and there's a whole laundry list of cases. And to be quite frank with you, there's a lot of holdover prosecutions, let's call them, that are highly questionable, and the main justice doesn't really want to get involved at the highest levels, whether they're intimidated by these 94 field offices or what, but they don't want to sort of intervene, which, in my opinion, I would like to see them take a more maximalist interventionist position because otherwise, these 94 field offices are given free reign and weaponization is not actually cleaned up, politicization is not cleaned up. The same bad actors are not cleared out. I mean, what we saw Ed Martin do in the DC field office was he went in there, identified the problem, basically people, and fired them on day one. But I can tell you that that's not happening in 90 to the 93 other offices, and it's a shame.
wow. Yeah, I mean, that is. I was familiar with Ed Martin and, what he was doing there. I mean, I had never spoken to him or anything like that, but it seemed like he was doing a great job. And then we had Tom Tillis really coming out pretty hard against Ed Martin to try to prevent him from becoming he was just the interim U.S. Attorney in Washington,
Yeah.
D.C., if I'm not mistaken. And now we've got Judge Jeanine Pirro in there. I had noticed that Ed follows me on Twitter because I was posting a lot of stuff about Tom Tillis and had found that Tom Tillis was involved in what appears to be a really serious multi-million-dollar legal scam, real estate scam. Has Judge Jeanine taken up the mantle in any manner similar to Ed Martin, do you know?
So from what I understand, she has, but remember that she is running the Washington field office, so their jurisdiction is sort of limited in that respect. So for example, my case has nothing to do with the Washington field office, um, or yeah, the Washington field office, the Washington U.S. Attorney's office, I should say.
Right.
So yeah, I understand that she picked up the torch, is my understanding.
And have there been any positive changes in the Eastern District of New York, U.S. Attorney's Office since Trump took office? Do you know?
Well, I don't know 100%, but we saw, unfortunately, I know people that were being prosecuted in the EDNY on very suspicious sort of circumstances, very questionable cases, and they have continued with these cases. They haven't intervened. To be frank, I don't know anything about Joseph Dosell as you see him here, who's the acting U.S. attorney, and he's the nominee for U.S. attorney in Brooklyn. And I don't know that much about him. I know he's a local guy from Long Island. And to be quite frank, I don't know what he's done, in the district there. There was a case from some people that I got to know a little bit from this company called One Taste, and they have practiced a sort of weird Eastern uh, meditation thing. That's kind of like, to be quite frank, it's a little bit odd and strange called orgasmic meditation. Now, the bottom line for me in that case is not orgasmic meditation. It's not something I partake in by any stretch of the imagination. However, I saw the same exact type of thing that they did in my case, where they, first of all, brought a single count conspiracy charge. They lied over and over again about the authenticity of some of the evidence. And they lied through their teeth until they couldn't lie anymore. And then at the last minute before the trial, they said, "Okay, sorry, we're not going to bring up the diary anymore because it's not authentic." And the FBI agent is sort of a rogue cowboy, which we see in New York, and he failed to follow chain of custody for evidence. And it's not
Wow.
the first case where he did it. It's actually the second case. The other case he did it was the Rainier case.
Huh.
And the problem with the EDNY is that the judges let the prosecution get away with it. And if you're going to let them lie and misrepresent and give them not even a slap on the wrist, if they get caught, then they're going to keep doing it over and over again. And that's a pattern of behavior that I don't see being rooted out in the EDNY at all. The acting U.S. attorney went on Twitter and went on, and sent out a press release celebrating this conviction that they got for this case in the EDNY, where it's a forced labor charge, but it's a bunch of, people that uh, adults who willingly joined in with this meditation group. And then years down the line, they're like, well, I regret, I should have done that. I regret that. I spent too much money on that. I took out credit card debt to pay these people. And I slept around with people I shouldn't have slept around with. And they turned this into a forced labor conspiracy.
Wow. You see, you're identifying a problem that I think is not just limited to the Eastern District of New York. I agree that is a problematic spot for sure, but I think this is happening. This is a widespread problem where it almost feels like, particularly young attorneys just see this happening and they figure this is the way that it's done. Our justice system has been so corrupted by this. I mean, the net result is that there just is no justice and you can't rely on getting a fair shake in court. It's basically luck, and if you're politically aligned with whoever is in charge at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 100% luck. And look, once they bring a case, they never dismiss it. I mean, I know we had a slight difference of opinion in the SDNY there when they dismissed the Eric Adams case, but the bottom line, and maybe they shouldn't have dismissed that particular case, but I would like to see Main Justice go in and clean up these places and put them on notice that, look, if we catch you doing this kind of behavior, like, first of all, you're out, and we're not going to pursue these sort of questionable cases anymore. We're going to
Yeah.
dismiss them, even if they're already, almost at trial or whatever. There's another gentleman in Utah by the name of Dr. Moore who, he gave people saline shots instead of the COVID vaccine because these were people who were on the kidney transplant list or the organ transplant list, and they weren't going to get an organ transplant unless they got a COVID shot. So he sort of gave them the certificate, and
Ooh.
they're throwing the whole entire book at this guy, and 18 US 371 and all this stuff, and a lot of people in the military too. But what we've learned is that all those people in the military are being reinstated with back pay if they so choose. The ones that skip the COVID vaccine. So it's like at a certain point, they need to sort of drop these sort of witch hunts, I think.
Well, not only that, wasn't there recently some study, maybe from Japan, that said the more COVID vaccinations you get, let me be careful what I say here. It was finding some correlation between, yeah, here it is. So this is the NIH. So I guess that's a respected source according to YouTube.
Yeah.
This is death after the administration of COVID-19 vaccine approved as a causal relationship been demonstrated. That's a hell of a
Yeah.
study. The abstract here tells us that more than 8 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines have been administered globally so far, and 44.29% of people are fully vaccinated. Holy cow.
Yeah, it's wild. And, RFK Jr. just said, look, we're going to do actual clinical trials for these vaccines now. And this is sort of causing a whole kerfuffle because they didn't do clinical trials, as we know, and they didn't
Yeah.
do real trials. And they just said, well, we're going to put the COVID vaccine on the schedule. Pregnant women, little tiny babies, all need to get a flu shot and a COVID vaccine, and the list goes on and on. And so, this doctor who was just trying to get his patients, taken care of, and it's not like he profited on this endeavor. It's not like he put a bunch of money into his pocket either.
No, he
And
put his
so,
whole entire career at risk, and look at what he's gotten as a result of it. Doesn't sound too good for that guy.
no, it doesn't sound good for him at all. And yeah, this is the exact kind of case where Maine justice should override these local offices. Because look, they're gonna do the same thing. My prosecution was being investigated and lined up for years under Trump.
Wow.
And obviously they don't tell them what they're doing. They don't tell Donald Trump what they're doing.
Right.
They investigate these cases and then they either bring them or they convince Trump to bring them or they just wait until he's out of office. And if we don't rein in these U.S. attorneys' offices, that's what they're going to do for the next 3 years, guaranteed. And they're going to do the same exact thing that they did when they went after Trump.
Mm.
And they went after the pro-life protesters. The list goes on and on.
Yeah, it's a really troubling set of circumstances, Doug, because when and I think you recognize this, and you're not trying to blame Donald Trump, but when you say that this happened
No.
under Donald Trump's DOJ, it's the fact is you're talking about a guy who's the chief executive of the United States. And anybody who's ever run a company, I mean, I used to run a company, there were 7 employees, and sometimes you'd discover that somebody was up to something that you didn't know about until it created a problem. And you're like, wait a minute, you did what? And so we've got all these divisions doing things. It's just inherently impossible for Donald
Yeah,
Trump to oversee all of it.
exactly. The problem was more with Bill Barr and but that's what's going to happen. Like, yeah, of course, Trump has nothing to do with this. He has no idea what's going on with every single investigation that's open. But you got to if you don't keep these officers on a tight leash, then that's what's going to happen over and over again.
Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Pam Bondi is doing that very effectively. I think she's appearing on the news quite a lot, and she looks great for a woman of 60. But so far, we've heard, we're going to see Epstein files, but now Kash Patel says, no, Epstein killed himself. There's nothing to see, no videos from that island, nothing at all. Trust me, he's smoking cigars with Joe Rogan, can't be lying. What do you think about that Kash
Yeah,
Patel situation?
I think we need the transparency. I mean, look, if whoever it is destroyed the files, destroyed the evidence, then just say it. If the evidence is there, and I've heard things like we don't want to victimize people but like let's get some transparency. I mean, why can't they either send if let's say this sort of treasure trove of videos exists, well, censor it and let a dozen reporters look at it. Do something with it. Don't just say, oh, one day uh, we hear that the evidence is gone. The next day we hear, well, it's just too much. We don't want to victimize people over again. And then, did he kill himself? Did he not kill himself? Well, why can't they show the video of that? And if that video is destroyed, like, look, let's put all the cards on the table. But that's what I'd like to see.
It was a pretty strange interview with Joe Rogan. I mean, it seemed like he was excited to be there and, enjoying the celebrity aspect of it. I don't know. I'm not trying to get you to say anything that might get you in trouble. I know you're relying on the cooperation of a lot of these people potentially to help your case, but I've been extremely disappointed with Kash Patel. He's sitting here on the largest podcast in the world talking about how he doesn't do media. I think he really made a fool of himself there.
Well, I wasn't even aware. Look, like you said, I remain optimistic about Kash Patel and the whole DOJ, FBI We'll see. I mean, the proof is going to be in the pudding, right? We're going to see what happens these next couple of years. I would say that we do see certain divisions that are very active and very effective, like, for example, civil rights division under Harmeet Dillon. So it's like it's doable, it can be done. The proof will be in the pudding over these next few years. And I understand that they have a lot of cases to pursue and all these child pornographers and all that kind of thing. And so it's a lot of work, but let's see. I'm hoping they can get some stuff done.
Now, I must say, I'm not personally, I do admire how much you keep up on some of these things, and some of them are rather complicated. I haven't followed too much of what Harmeet Dillon has been doing. What caught your attention that she's doing with Civil Rights Division?
Well, with the Civil Rights Division, there's a lot that you can do at the federal level. For instance, if like the state, I can't remember exactly, but if like you get wind that these police departments, let's say, or these local law offices or universities or whatever, or let's say breaking civil rights law by discriminating against, with like we see with DEI, no white men allowed. We
Right.
don't want, and so that's sort of the thing that they have the power to do is just by opening up investigations and sort of getting things done. The other thing that they can do is they can, oh yeah, these consent decrees, which are absolutely decimating a lot of these police departments in a lot of these places. And it's like they sign these consent decrees that go on that stretch for decades. For instance, in Minneapolis, which basically the police don't do anything. And then the police can't do anything because they're under a DOJ consent decree. And then crime explodes. And it's just a vicious cycle. So she's able to end a lot of these consent decrees so that these police departments can actually keep the streets safe. So besides that, they enter on some of these cases like with transgender medical procedures and that kind of thing. They can enter in civil lawsuits as amicus. So Harmeet is very active and she's very smart and she's very, I would say, savvy. She's not, to be frank, we see a lot of times these performative figures come in and really what they're angling for is, media hits and maybe TV shows down the line in their future. But that's not what we see with Harmeet Dillon. What we're seeing is that she is, really committed to getting things actually done.
Yeah, well, that's good. I hope we see that. I'm just concerned. It feels like Donald Trump started off very strong the first 100 days, and now, between Kash Patel's FBI,
Hmm.
Epstein promises, and some of the concerns about, potential. I mean, obviously, nobody wants to see rogue states gain nuclear weapons, but again,
No.
it's just very concerning when we start talking about another one of these Middle East adventures that just
Yeah.
every time they've done it, it seems to turn into just a catastrophic destruction of life and waste of money. And when you look at, like I was just talking to somebody about this today, from 1998 to today, New York City just alone has gotten so much worse in terms of crime and pollution and quality of life, and taxes have gone up, purchasing power has gone down. I was just in the supermarket this afternoon and I noticed, something I like to buy, bison meat, it's gone up in price again by one more dollar. Everything is
Hmm.
going up except for people's salaries. It's very disconcerting, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see that the swamp is so powerful and you go in there like a wrecking ball, but then 6 months down the line, you got to pass a spending bill. And
Yeah.
then they've kind of got you where they want you at that point. They got a million levers to pull on you. I mean, it's just very difficult. I still have confidence in President Trump that he's going to get the job done. But, even like we see with the whole Iran Middle East thing, where sort of, you know, Israel can kind of go in there and bomb half of Iran, and then the pressure to finish the job, so to speak, becomes insurmountable. on
Right.
President Trump. So like
Right.
it's sort of like well, you can't just leave it alone, but you don't want to, it's very difficult basically. It's create these catch-22s, and they got everybody, when you're the most powerful man in the most powerful office, is trying to manipulate you and influence you one way or another.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's an incredibly difficult position to be in. I'm very concerned when I see, rallies and riots and things in Times Square. People are thinking,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
Iran doesn't have the ability to reach the United States with a missile. But of course, stupid Joe Biden has spent the last 4 years letting everybody under the sun into the United States. And, New York Times or whoever it was saying that reports of sleeper cells in the United States are unverified. I don't know about unverified. I just walk around New York City
Yeah.
and I see troves of criminals all over the place. So I don't know if you need to verify it. It just seems very probable. Now, Doug, we've got an
Oh yeah,
interesting
absolutely.
comment here from one of our viewers on YouTube, 8647. I don't know how you feel about this kind of stuff, but it was pointed out that when Comey posted that, it was 8,647 days since 9/11. Do you think that's a coincidence, or was James
Wow.
Comey sending some kind of message?
I mean, I wouldn't rule anything out there because we know that, a lot of people view these numbers, this numerology thing, as something that's important to them. So I wouldn't
Exactly.
rule anything out.
Exactly. And, even when we just talk about it, there's going to be some people say, oh, that's conspiracy theory. And you talk about numerology. I'm not saying that I necessarily believe in it. I'm just saying I acknowledge that it's a thing. And as you just said, there are people who believe in it, and there are people who believe that it has power. And maybe if James Comey is one of those people, who knows why I like how you pose that you wouldn't rule anything out.
No.
Let's see. Since 9/11, Comey. Because, the FBI, I don't know how you feel about 9/11, but there, in my opinion, was a pretty extensive cover-up of a lot of the facts. I mean, just like you're saying, how they lie in court. They lie about their investigations. They lie about these major ordeals like 9/11. And then look at all the death and destruction, not even on that day, but in the wars that came about afterwards in Afghanistan and Iraq.
No
Yeah.
doubt in my mind, yeah. That
Here's
they're letting the information out that they want to let out. That's
exactly.
it.
Here's an AI overview, Doug. It says
Mhm.
8,647 days after the 9/11 attacks was May 15th, 2025. This date gained attention after former FBI Director James Comey posted the number 8647 on Instagram. I mean, it really is almost too coincidental to be just a coincidence. I think James Comey would have been aware of that.
Oh yeah, no, I wouldn't surprise me at all if he was aware of that or if people tell them about it. We see all this kind of thing with these sort of veiled threats, and there's a lot of weird stuff going on.
Absolutely. I don't know if James Comey is a Mason. He was using that secret Reinhold Niebuhr email address. Did we ever talk about that?
No, the sort of like philosopher guy, the Niebuhr guy, yeah.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a guy he admires.
Yeah, and he used it as a secret email address. I probably would have shared this with you previously, but in the event that I didn't, here's this email. This email came to my attention because I believe this was part of an effort to frame Charles Ortel, my longtime friend and associate on the show, who, so this is an email that was sent from a guy named Benjamin Wittes.
Mm-hmm.
Benjamin Wittes has been on and off the director of something called the Lawfare Institute.
Yep.
It's a related organization within the Brookings Institution. And what's interesting is I believe the Lawfare Institute is an FBI cutout. And I know you know
yeah.
what I mean when I say that. There's certain things, like we were talking about the Posse Comitatus Act and how certain military branches are legally restricted from doing certain things, and so they create these task forces with the Coast Guard, potentially because they're not restricted. I believe this Lawfare Institute is an FBI cutout because it can do certain things that the FBI could not easily do. For instance, the FBI can't civilly sue me, and they can't take me into civil court and sue me for 8 years and have lunatics harassing my octogenarian parents, because the FBI just can't do that. But if they have
Hmm.
a lawfare institute that can hire a law firm that, under attorney-client privilege, can hire research firms or PR firms or cybersecurity firms, they can then go do these things, and it doesn't really trace
Yep.
back to the FBI. But I think that that's what this email is all about. Benjamin Wittes emails, look, you see here, Reinhold Niebuhr. That's
Yep.
James
Yep. Yep.
Comey. And then James Comey
Yeah.
forwards it from Reinhold Niebuhr to James Comey at ic.fbi. Have you ever noticed
Hmm.
that detail about an FBI
No.
email address? So I was interacting with, in trying to get the harassment to stop, I was interacting with the FBI field office in Detroit. And I was dealing with an agent there who his email address was whatever his name was at fbi.gov, because he was just a special agent, the lowest level,
Yeah.
non-janitor at the FBI that you can possibly be. But I subsequently noticed that executives at the FBI, people like James Comey, people like Andrew McCabe, former General Counsel Valerie Caproni, their email addresses include ic.fbi.gov, because they're part
Strange.
of the intelligence community.
Very strange. I
Yeah,
had no
and so
idea.
he's forwarding it then from James Comey to James Rybicki,
This
Andrew
Baker,
McCabe,
amazing.
Jim Baker. Right.
Yeah.
These are all the guys who are. Jim Baker later goes on to be the general counsel at Twitter. And this is all this stuff that they're opening an investigation. Wittes is telling Comey that he's got this information about Trump and Russia and hacking, and it contains a number of highly detailed accounts
Yep.
of stuff that would be explosive if publicly investigated. And so, I mean, I'm not saying you should investigate this, but maybe. And so then the FBI
Yeah.
can say, hey, this email from a whistleblower or a legal consultant or whatever they want to categorize this guy as, it becomes a predicate for them to go and do something to private individual citizens. Not you in this case, but something like this could easily have led them to someone like you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Benjamin Wittes intimately involved with the whole Russiagate, and big proponent of it, and one of these people on Twitter sort of hinting at sort of indictments and all this kind of stuff. And of course, we know that it's sort of this fever dream of this partisan, and then this becomes the basis for investigation, just like in my case, same type of thing. This investigation by the Huffington Post becomes the basis for prosecution, and it's just, it's they sort of believe all this kind of stuff. They sort of fall for it every time. We see as Trump's a Russian asset. And the fact that these people are at the highest levels of power is insane.
I agree with you. Now, wait a minute. You might have just mentioned something that I wasn't aware of. The Huffington Post played a role in your prosecution?
Yeah, so they they played a role in my prosecution just by doxing me, right? So
Oh,
just by doxing me, they sort of laid the basis for the eventual investigation. I posted under a pseudonym back in those days, a long time ago. Uh,
hmm.
so they used that as the basis for their investigation to say this is the guy who posted the meme back in 2016.
No, this is definitely it's like a recipe almost, and I agree with you. Ben Wittes is very involved. Now, did you know that his Twitter account was suspended?
No, I had no idea. It's just sort of a April Fool's joke. I wonder if they brought it back.
Well, no, he is not pursuing getting it back. He did this on purpose because what happened was
Ah,
just prior to this, I sued Ben Wittes. So he did
right.
something that he knew would get the account suspended to make it easy to tell a court, oh, the account is suspended. We can't get the evidence that Jason is
Yeah,
looking
I've
for,
seen, yep. Then
you
they get
know?
to evade discovery. I've
Exactly.
seen someone else do that recently in
Yeah.
civil court, which is a man by the name of Chuck Johnson,
Oh.
where he deleted his ex account and then he claimed that Elon Musk personally suspended it. And then a couple weeks later, in discovery of these civil suits, he said, "Well, I can't access the Twitter account anymore
See,
because Elon Musk, well, he's the one
you've been in court enough
yeah,
to know, Doug, that even though that might not be true, see, there's a moment there where if you can convince the judge that it's not accessible, and the judge says, well, all right, that's it. We don't have access to that. Let's move on. It's out. It's no longer in the case. And that is what these guys are trying to do. Have you ever seen my encounter with Benjamin Wittes? That might be a fun thing for you to take a look at.
No.
Oh, you're going to like this. Ben Wittes, my man, how you doing? You're here for the lawfare, aren't you? Hey, listen, motherfucker, you are a liar. You set this whole thing up. You, Andrew Weissman, and what's his name, Norm Eisen, you guys got Michael Cohen to set this whole thing up with Stormy Daniels. He paid her with his own money. Costello just testified to that. You're such a fucking liar, it's insane. What's with all this money that gets sent to your house for the nonprofit? That's criminal. You should go to jail for that. And your nonprofit, the Lawfare Institute, has paid over $300,000 to Vindman since he lied on the stand. All of you fucking guys are gonna go to jail. Do you know that? Why did you come over here? See, it's interesting how the police come right over to Mr. Wittes. Isn't that so interesting? They run right over. They know exactly who that fucking scumbag is. So I had no idea he was coming out. That was all just, extemporaneous. Wow. But he's a bad, bad guy.
He was coming out of the Trump courtroom?
Yeah, that was the whole Stormy Daniels trial. I was on fire that week. I ran into him. I ran into Norm Eisen. Maybe you've seen my Norm Eisen encounter. That's basically one of my most viewed videos ever.
Absolutely.
That one's gotten a lot.
I've seen that one.
Yeah, it's
just like that other kooky lady who accused Trump of the rape. That was dreamed up by George Conway and those people.
It's terrible what these guys are allowed to get away with. It's very, very upsetting. Well, Doug, I appreciate you sharing your time with us. I know you've got to get back to your family. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss before we wrap up today?
Not in particular. Just keep your eye on my case. And thank you so much for promoting the memedefensefund.com. Anybody wants to donate can go there. Really appreciate it. We'll be keeping an eye on the current events of the news and keeping my eye on your account.
Thank you very much, Doug, and I appreciate you. I'm sorry you've been put through all of this, and I hope you are able to obtain justice in this incredibly corrupt system that we're living in. I want to remind everybody that they can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com. You can also go to subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And of course, people who are following me on X at JG_CSTT can subscribe there to receive sponsor exclusive content and to sponsor the show. Doug Mackey, great to see you. Have a great weekend. And thanks for watching, everybody.